Hi, everybody. So we're looking at a free speech protest this weekend in Dublin, this Saturday in Dublin. But if you're watching this after the 14th of December, as I imagine some of you will be, don't worry, because most of this, hopefully at least, will be relevant to you. The information here is kind of evergreen and it's not time sensitive. So, and even if you're not Irish, I think it might be of some interest to you anyway. It's kind of general stuff, even though it's about a specific event. Now, with that said, what am I actually talking about? So I want to go through material here and demonstrate something based on evidence and look through all of this kind of stuff, which is what I like to do for the most part. But in order to get there, I need to set the table, set the stage, so we can understand what this is about. And it's a little bit convoluted, but bear with me just for a couple of minutes. So at the core here is a free speech protest, like I said. But what I'll be looking at for the most part is what's on either side of that. Because on one side, you have what is being protested. That is legislation from the Irish government on what they're calling hate speech. I would call it speech codes or censorship, but whatever. They're hate speech legislation, right? And that's being protested by this free speech demo at the weekend. And then on the other side of things, we have a protest, which is protesting the protest, a counterdemo. So, right, so you have that kind of tripartite thing. The legislation, the protest against it, and then the protest against the protest. And it's those two things on either side that I want to focus on, because looking at the evidence, and hopefully I will be able to, demonstrate this beyond any kind of doubt, is that those two things on either side are inextricably linked to each other, and they are kind of the same thing in a sense. And that's worth understanding, in my opinion. So going back to the hate speech thing, at the moment, it's in a consultation process, allegedly, right? Which is finishing up soon. But anybody involved in this, I think left, right, in between, up or down, I think most people will agree that that is a charade. This whole thing is kind of preordained and it's coming down the pike pretty quickly. And it's not really, the government don't even pretend to have a modicum of objectivity on this. They don't. So that's where it's at. And then secondly, hate speech. The ordinary person could hear that and think, well, that must mean something like incitement to violence or shouting, slurs at people on the street or something like that, right? Now, for one, that is largely already legislated for, has been for 30 odd years. But regardless, that is not what this is about. This is targeting political speech. I would say ordinary political speech, albeit maybe a bit controversial or contentious, but it's ordinary speech. I would go as far as to say that the majority of people, if asked objectively about these topics, would agree on them. They certainly would agree with the right to express an opinion on them, but I think they would agree with the actual content itself anyway. And thirdly, is that my opinion? It's in a consultation process, so therefore, how do I know what it's intending to be, right? Well, I do, because the Minister for Justice and Equality, Charlie Flanagan, in this country, was asked on radio, so what give us an example, pretty much asked for an example on it, and he gave an example. And let's have a look at that example now, shall we?
And that's why I'm very keen, along with Minister Stanton, to ensure that we have robust legislation that can deal with hate speech, which is totally unacceptable.
Should you call it out? Yes. Should other elected representatives call it?
Now, this is not the point I want to make here, but I have to say, listen to how much of a patsy this radio presenter is. She's in a two-sided discussion with a leading politician. If she's taking any position, it should be that of a devil's advocate. It should be dialectical, right? That's the only one that would objectively make sense. But no, she's like, should you call it out, Charlie? Should you? And he's like, yeah, I should. Yeah, definitely. I should. Yeah.
Out when you see
Absolutely.
It.
Absolutely. I've no difficulty in so doing.
No difficulty.
I had a bad experience myself at the ploughing championships, where I witnessed the type of prejudice that is certainly not reflective of Ireland.
Now, he said that that's the kind of prejudice that's not reflective of Ireland. I witnessed it myself at the ploughing, etc. So he's teeing this up as like, this is an example. This is of my own volition example of what hate speech or whatever is, right? And here's the question he was asked. Judge for yourself.
Charlie, a couple of questions about mass immigration into the country. Get your hands up, mate. Get your hands up, mate. I want to ask you some questions about mass immigration, Charlie.
Certainly rural Ireland.
What did you see?
Well, I was followed around by people from the alt-right in a way that was
The
upsetting.
alt-right.
Charlie, can I ask you some questions about mass immigration into the country? Put your hands off me.
I mean, the Fine Gael, 10 talking to Fine Gael people here.
Yeah, we have some questions about mass immigration. The Irish people are concerned about the levels of mass immigration coming into this country.
I'm a public representative. I take the slings and arrows of public representation like everybody else. But I thought it was something new, and I thought it was something that was disturbing. And I'm very keen to ensure that it doesn't become normalised in our society.
Stop running away. Ask the questions. Answer the questions. Charlie, where are you running to? Answer the questions. Come on, Charlie.
Okay, so it kind of goes on like that. Now, Niall is a bit boisterous and, straightforward on this stuff, but at its core, he's asking a very reasonable, simple question, right? And Charlie emphasized that as his example of what we're talking about here. Now, I have listed out a few points which I think, and hopefully you'll agree with me here, are in line with that kind of question that Niall asked, equally reasonable and whatever. So just to give you a flavor of what kind of things could be quashed and suppressed, and you could be punished for potentially, the kind of questions under this legislation. So I'm just going to, I'm not going to be pretending to memorize these. They have them written down, right? But the ability to ask, question, debate whether or not we want to become a minority in Ireland within the next 20 to 40 years, whether or not there is any onus on Ireland or a need for affirmative action or quotas in employment, education and politics, whether or not there is any direct correlation between diversity and everything getting better. So with each added increment of diversity, things get equally better. Diversity is our strength, and it's kind of like, well, at what point will we have the correct, perfect amount of it? Or is there such a thing? It's a legitimate open debate. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. Whether or not we want to facilitate and invite the same level of Islamization as is seen, for example, in countries like England and France. Whether or not communities in Ireland should be allowed to decline a direct provision centre in their locality when 95% of them have voted against it. Whether we want to pursue an asylum policy more like Hungary and Japan or Sweden and France. Whether or not we can discuss the general validity or lack thereof of asylum claims based on the best available information. So we're talking Georgians and Albanians there, right? Can we openly inquire as to the effect immigration has on the availability of healthcare and housing, if any? To what extent do we want Ireland to be globalised? And that's key here because that's maybe another video. To what extent should non-Irish, non-resident individuals and corporations be allowed to own and profit from Irish capital and the exchange of goods and services on this island? Which kind of leads to, who does Ireland actually belong to here? And what actually is Ireland, right? These are the kind of questions and themes that Charlie is directly speaking about here. We know that. And the other thing is, even if you don't agree with the tenor of these points, you think, well, I'm not quite into that, or I don't agree with those points of view or whatever. Well, let's not forget about the UN Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19, right? Everyone has the right to freedom of expression and opinion. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Now, that's a question I have for these guys. I'm like, how are you getting around this one? I thought, what happened to human rights, lads? They're skirting around this one, but, this is a human right and it's a general natural right. So what happened to that? But anyway, I digress. The next thing we're looking at is this counter demonstration, and that's going to be the bulk of this video. Hopefully I can keep it short, but I always say that. This is the counter demonstration. It is, what's it calling itself? The anti-censorship or the pro-censorship demonstration, the anti-freedom of speech? No, they're calling themselves, the Rally for Peace on Earth, right? Big ideas here, or big notions. Rally for Peace on Earth. And I'm just going to read through it now, sorry. So in this season of peace and joy, we faith groups, trade unions, community groups, ordinary working women and men, children and families are coming together on Saturday, 14th December to sing and eat mince pies in the spirit of the festive season and to stand up for an Ireland where everyone feels safe and welcome, where we don't give airtime to those who seek to divide us, and where we can benefit from the richness that all cultures and all people bring to this island. We are proud of which? Okay, a little bit of issue with the English there, but that's okay. Sadly, today, the far right are trying to divide us. The far people who believe in free speech. Okay. They prey on our concerns about housing, job security, and healthcare, preying on things. Okay. It's all very demonic, kind of. They try to pull us apart with divisive tactics and distract us from working together for positive change. Okay, I would ask how. What's your idea? They try to get us to blame others and fight each other instead of campaigning against the causes of poverty, exclusion, and corruption and austerity. They seek to divide us because they have no solutions. Okay. We must at this time continue to hold the space of in blah blah blah. Right. Okay. You get the gist. While the far right are gathering or are mobilizing in Dublin for hate and division on the 14th of December, we are gathering for love and unity. Now, I would say, why not gather for love and unity as a counter demo somewhere else, right? Because the point is not to say they're going to do their bad thing over here, we're going to do our good thing over here, and spread positive vibes and love and peace and harmony for on Earth and for the rest of eternity or whatever they're claiming, right? No, they're not doing that. They're coming to the same time, the same place. This was announced weeks, maybe months after the original demonstration. So my original point, why is this here? Why are they doing it at this time? Sorry. At this time and at this place. It's to intimidate, obviously, and to, basically that. But the link I want to get to is here, right? So this is at the bottom of that flyer they have, is who the rally is being supported by. And hopefully you can see it here. All of these various NGOs, because you might wonder, oh, maybe this rally is people who have deeply held convictions and beliefs, and that's what it is, and they feel this way and all of this. But no, it's all of these organizations, right? And that's the point here. You know what? This is the main part of this video, because it's these organizations is what I want to look at. And I pulled out 12, just 12. So I don't know how many are listed here entirely, but I pulled out 12 of them to have a look at them. And let's take a little look at these organizations, shall we? Now, to start with, we have Balbriggan Integration Forum. Now, their government funding, $6,000, right? And I'm going to claim that all of these things are government funded organizations, right? Which is what this counter protest consists of. That's going to be my claim. Here it's 6,000, $6,000 of it is $7,000 is government funding. And then 13 is non-government funding. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to stop this video now, because here we see the majority is non-government. Well, most of that is Corja, as you can see here, which is 13,000. But if you go to Corja and look at their funding, all government funding. And that's the thing you need to know if you're ever researching NGOs, is that it's kind of a circular thing, but it always goes back to the same trough, which is effectively the government. And by the way, the categories I have here for these NGOs is government, EU, and then billionaires, right? This is who I'm calculating here. Billionaires. By billionaires, I mean philanthropies, right? Philanthropies are basically for billionaires and multimillionaires. And I'm actually going to focus on two specifically to keep it kind of simple. So I'm using, this is in a sense being conservative. I'm looking at state funding, EU funding, and then I'm only taking two billionaire kind of philanthropies, one being the Open Societies Foundation, George Soros, and the other being Atlantic Philanthropies, Chuck Feeney originally, right? And that's what I'll be looking at. How much of these guys' funding and existence stems from these entities? So that's that. We have Doris Lumley, and all of these are listed in attendance. Government funding, 339,000, the majority of their funding. European Network Against Racism, ENAR, in Ireland, so ENAR. Most of their funding from Pobble, which is, again, the government, 75,000. We have the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, which hilariously claim to stand up for free speech, but then they're against hate speech too. And they kind of slightly fail to square that circle. But regardless, it's ridiculous, it's preposterous, these contradictions. Civil liberties are meant to mean hard things like free speech. And like I say, outlined clearly in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from the UN, 1948. There was no if or but on that declaration. But the Irish Council for Civil Liberties have imagined that there was. Now, this ICCL, most of their funding, 339,000, comes from the EU, right? So again, if you think these are, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people who just care about something, well, I submit to you, 339,000 from the EU, 125,000 from the Atlantic Philanthropies, which themselves, one of their big roles over the last couple of decades was opening up America's immigration policy, right? They were dead focused on that. Now, were they focused on it because they're really sound? Were they really nice guys? Or is there an agenda there? The next one is Open Society Foundations, 64,000. Now, George Soros and Open Society Foundations are really sound. George Soros is a really sound guy. When he shorted the British economy to make millions for himself cynically, very cynically. He was gloating about that within a week of it, and that invariably would have driven countless British people to family breakup, despair, and suicide. I'm guessing, right? That's George Soros. That's the sound guy who feels like giving 64,000, a Hungarian, to Irish Council for Civil Liberties because he's a sound guy, right? Of course. Next, we have the Irish Refugee Council, 149,000 in government funding, and then another 305,000 from Atlantic Philanthropies. They're attending on Saturday to oppose our opposition to the Fine Gael government's censorship laws. We have the Latin America Solidarity Cooperative Society. I mean, why are they even giving money? What's that of our business? 26,000 from the Irish government, mostly Irish aid. They're coming, surprisingly enough. Wow. We have the MRCI, and I couldn't get the detailed breakdown of this, but they do list their. This would not be possible without the support of our funders and partners. And look, you can see all of that there. EU, Department of Justice, blah, 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 right? NASC. Here we have NASC. They're funded 193,000 by the state and then 40,000 from Atlantic Philanthropies. Brilliant. National Women's Council of Ireland, who provide no service to the public, according to Gript anyway, and I'll take their word for it. And I did look up their website. I couldn't see any hard service. Here we have, by the way, government funding, 719,000. So you go, wow, they must get a lot of blankets for people, or a lot of food packages or something like that, right? They must get a lot for 119,000 to help people with, right? But no, you look at their figures here, and we have now. I need to refocus on this to figure out what I'm looking at. Yeah, so from the Department of Justice, the Department of Community, basically from the government, we have 739,000 euros here. And then we look at staff costs, and it's 718,000 in staff costs. So what do we have here of a difference? We have, I don't want to betray myself with maths on video live here now, but somewhat of a difference, right? Tiny difference. Most of it is staff. They employ about 15 people. So that's a lot of weekend breaks. That's a lot of, nice things, right? Crazy. I forgot my face. That was going to be for comedic effect, but I left it too late. Messed it up, right? But that's NCWI. And they're attending. Wow, isn't that such a surprise that they're attending when this is their wages? Look at 519,000 from the Department of Justice and Equality. On the weekend, we are directly protesting the Department of Justice and Equality. They're paid 519,000 by the Department of Justice and Equality, and it just so happens that they're mobilizing to protest against us defending ourselves from censorship at the weekend. Now the smiley face is appropriate, okay, or the next, we have Outhouse. This is some kind of a gay thing or whatever, right? Government funding 279,000. Again, I'm repeating myself here, but it is what it is. Oxfam, 3.2 million from the government. Now a lot of their stuff is foreign based, as far as I know, but regardless, their bread is buttered to the extent of 3 million from Irish Aid. Now Irish Aid, or just like the Department of Justice and Equality, will be pushing for this censorship law. So again, should we be surprised? Sligo Traveller Support Group. What do we have? Government funding 279,000. And just as it happens, this is anecdotal, but I've spoken to several travellers about this. One specifically comes to mind who I spoke to a couple of weeks ago. I was actually on a walk and we started chatting. And he told me, and I hear this a lot, that most ordinary travellers are like, these traveller NGOs and groups or whatever are just sucking up money for themselves, and they've nothing, they don't represent us and all of this, right? So it's not about travellers. Again, it's probably the same as the National Women's Council. Most of this is just salaries. It's a handy gig, right? But I would contend that every now and again, for your money, you're going to have to protest. You're going to have to protest people who are protesting the government, the very people who are paying these guys. Again, I repeat myself. Smashing Times, which is this really bougie kind of theatre company, and I can imagine that they make the shittest art in the world, that nobody cares about. And when they do, what do they call them? Installations and all this, it's their friends come to see it and drink the wine, and they all kiss each other's arses. Completely useless bougie art. And really, go look at this website. They're despicable looking. But anyway, all funded by the government effectively, right? 197,000 for them. And they, a theatre company, are coming to oppose this rally. So surprising, so shocked. And now, when you add all this up, of these 12 NGOs, this wasn't all of them, this is just 12. And I only listed the government stuff, the NGO stuff, and 2 of the billionaire philanthropy. So I left some stuff out. This is an underball. This is upwards of this figure. But alone on this, you have 6.9 million, 7 million in only 12 of the organizations listed as opposing us at the weekend. 7 million comes from the government. So this is an absolute joke. And of that, if you're curious, of that 7 million, just if you want to know the breakdown, you have 7.9% of it came from the EU, 7.7% of it came from the Atlantic Philanthropies and Open Society Foundation combined, and then 84.4% of it came from the government. So the majority of it, basically, they are government-funded activists, and they are coming to do activism against people who are protesting the government this weekend. And that is my point. Now, the next thing is some of these people are, you know, I say they're government funded, but some of them are these kind of diehard losers and psychopaths effectively, right? This kind of extreme far left. To call them left is actually an insult to decent left-wing socialist people, right? But anyway, far left we'll call them for now. Misanthropes are worried about this. And that's a point here. I'm just going to go back to the figure. Because they're worried about this protest that we're doing at the weekend. So don't for a second think that when this big counter-protest is organised by these funded NGOs, that maybe you should shy away from it, or you're not as big as these guys or something like that, because these guys are all money. And make no mistake, nationalist, populist, ordinary, decent, grassroots protests are coming up on these guys' radars. They are worried about this, and they're worried about it for a reason, because it's effective, it's growing, and people are getting into it because it fits with the times. This is necessary. People are speaking about relevant issues here. And, you know, like, why are these guys at this protest at the weekend? Why are they pulling out all of this money? Why are they getting out all the socialites and the celebrities, Panty Bliss and who else is there? A couple of people, these boujee socialites, effectively, right? And maybe they'll even try an agent provocateur, the fake Nazi saluter, or the fake guys in balaclavas, right? You know, these kind of tricks and games. Why are they pulling all of that out? It's desperation, right? And if you don't believe me, listen to this, which was taken from a far left meeting, tiny little far left private kind of meeting they had recently. They were speaking about the they call it the far right, right? It's anyone who's opposed to mass immigration and stuff like that. Listen to what they had to say. It's subtitled now because the audio isn't great.
So I think we're looking at the far right now at the moment. If you were to count people who turned up to at least 2 protests or rallies they held, you're probably talking about somewhere between 300 and 500 people, and that's way bigger than anything that existed as long as I've been at it. That goes back to the late 1980s, early 1990s. So we definitely have a problem.
So we definitely have a problem. And that problem, this far right they're talking about, this boogeyman, right? Of course, complete slander. This is what they're talking about. Some really, really good people. And this is what they want to stop. They want to stifle this kind of stuff. And like I said, it's a sandwich. On one side, it's the Department of Justice and the government and the state are terrified of this because they see a growing resistance to their treason. And it is treason. I mentioned to you Bartra, Immigrant Investor Program, various things like that. I'm going to make some more videos on this because it isn't a left or right issue. This should affect both sides, and both sides should be interested to some extent in a bit of nationalism here. But anyway, these are the people they're talking about. Ordinary, decent, really, really lovely people. And I don't care what kind of tricks they pull. I don't care what kind of numbers they muster up because of their 7 million, right? And their socialite celebrities. I don't care. I do not shirk away from that stuff. Because I'm proud as punch to stand with these people for what we believe in, and I think you should be too. So hopefully I will see you Saturday, right? Now, that's pretty much my scale for the evening. I hate doing this. Like, share, subscribe, smash like, but do subscribe, comment. I would love to see comments, like to see comments, and everything else. So yeah, that's pretty much the jazz for today. And like I said, hopefully I will see you Saturday. Take it easy. Bye.